President Putin and the Russians continue to press in an unimpeded way their goals in Ukraine. The Russians are responsible for the violence. We have a war underway in eastern Ukraine. 5,000 people have been killed since the outset of this thing. Putin has led Russia in a direction that's essentially adversarial now to the United States and the West.
Suddenly, the world is coming together to take emergency steps to slap down the Ukraine takeover by Russia. Emergency meetings are being held. Armies are being mobilized. Everyone was taken by such surprise. Who knew Vladimir Putin was considering such diabolical action? Buckle up, America. We've been involved for months and been about as effective in dealing with the murder of innocents as Germany and our other allies have. Let's welcome to MidPoint, former member of the U.S. House of Representatives, former chairman of the U.S. House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Pete Hoekstra joins us. Pete, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Ed.
Pete, here I have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal the headline, West races to defuse Ukraine crisis. Races to defuse a crisis that we've known has been going on for how long? I mean, this is really not shocking, but it's appalling to see that all of a sudden everybody's treating it as if it's just happened overnight.
It really is appalling. This is, I think it's the strategic patience that the president is talking about in foreign policy. It's, in situations like this in the past, the United States would lead, Europe would follow. In this case, there has been nobody leading for the last 12 to 18 months. We've had this discussion repeatedly here at Newsmax about what Putin is doing, the threat not only to Ukraine but to greater Europe. And now the West is racing. We've tried sanctions; they've been ineffective. And Putin is having his way with the West in Europe, and the rest of the world is taking notice.
Pete, what would make anybody think, at any level, any nation, that you could actually sit down, take care of Putin with sanctions, knowing full well who he is, what his background is, and what his eventual aim is? That, I think, has everybody just completely shaking their heads.
Well, I mean, this is why, the populations in the West are totally befuddled. Our leadership has believed that, with minimal sanctions against Russia, that Putin would change behavior in Ukraine. And what we're seeing now, a year later, is that it has only emboldened Putin. And as he is becoming more aggressive, as Russia is becoming more aggressive in threatening an expansion of activity in Europe rather than a pullback, all of a sudden, the West is now finding itself in the description that you gave when you started the program. We now have to race and try to come up with something that Putin believes will actually have an impact and that Putin believes the West will actually carry through on.
Pete, speaking of all this, I'm going to have you stand by and listen in, if you will, because the president now is speaking with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. They are addressing this very issue right now. Let's go live to Washington, D.C. and listen to the president and the German Chancellor.
Training separatists and helping to coordinate attacks.
All right, let's go back. Hang on. We have the audio back, guys. Let's go ahead. I think I just heard the audio kick in.
Armored personnel carriers and heavy artillery.
No, all right. Well, we're having a technical difficulty there, so we're not going to go to Washington, D.C. Pete, we'll go ahead and bring everybody up to speed on that as we find out a little bit more about what they are saying right now. What about when we hear things like the Russian state media, which is basically Russia Today, Pete, and that's their network, saying that the U.S. and the United Kingdom doesn't want peace. They are driving this right now, and these are the entities driving this thing towards war. How preposterous is this?
Well, it's preposterous, but remember, that media is not talking to the United States. They're not talking to the UK. They're talking to the Russian people. And so, Putin has been using this for the last year to build his political capital, his political cachet back home, and he's been very effective in doing it. He's accomplishing his political ends at home, and he's also gaining territory in Ukraine.
About 30 seconds left here before we take a break. We'll come back and talk about another hot spot here. But is Angela Merkel really anybody who can get something done, or is Putin laughing at her as much as he laughs at everybody?
It's hard to say, but for the last year, she's been a voice of calm and reason. We'll find out later on this week, but I think Putin's not only having his way with the United States, but with Germany and Europe as well.
I think he's been having his way for them for some time, which again brings out that wonderful headline that I saw about racing to defuse a Western crisis, or a Ukraine crisis, if you will. Racing when you've seen it going for a long, long time. Hang on, Pete. We're going to get back to you in a moment. We're going to turn to another global hotspot and seek some reality here. A king is taking point, exactly what America and the world needs. After all, no one else here seems willing to be bold in the fight against ISIS. At least, that is the perception. Let's get some reality. MidPoint will continue. There's one facet of Middle Eastern diplomacy that should never be underestimated, the macho effect, that of leaders there bellowing and blustering, and they don't need any help to fight the enemy. It's obvious they themselves are often the bad guys. And militarily speaking, it's like handing grenade launchers to a 4-year-old. We'll get to that in a moment as well in another part of the world. Let's welcome back to MidPoint former chairman of the U.S. House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, I just mentioned and alluded a little bit to what's going on in Syria and Jordan right now with regard to ISIS. But I got to bring this to you right now. The president in his press conference just within the last few moments with Angela Merkel said that it is clear Russia has violated previous agreements on Ukraine. Russia has sent in more tanks and artillery rather than withdrawing. Honestly, now, let's be real frank here. Did they write this 3 weeks ago? Because the president is basically stating things that the entire world knows, yet all he's doing in many ways, and other leaders, is wasting time by just telling us the obvious.
Well, going back to your opening comment of the last segment, it appears that the West is not rushing to any solutions or any aid to Ukraine. What the president, if that's what he said I'm sure that's what he said a couple of minutes ago. You're right. Our intelligence community, we can track this kind of stuff. We've known this has been going on for the last number of months. This is no surprise. This is Putin. This is who Putin is.
Wasting our time. Let us not then waste any more time on that. We'll follow what the president says later on. Let's get down to ISIS now, Jordan and Syria and the rest. Wanted to get your comment on this because according to the head of the Air Force in Jordan, he is claiming that the ISIS leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is running scared as a result of an intensified bombing campaign brought on by the murder of the Jordanian pilot. Would you believe for even 1 iota of a second that anybody in ISIS is running scared?
Not at this point. The targets that were out there that the Jordanians are going after, command and control, ammo dumps, and those types of things, hallelujah. But you know what? They were there a week ago. They were there a month ago. If the United States and the rest of this coalition was really going aggressively after ISIS, ISIS would be running scared. But it's the Jordanians, and the Jordanians are very, very good at what they do. But they're a small factor in this. And they're asking for more help. We'll see if they get it. The Kurds are asking for more help. They're not getting it very quickly. There are good guys in Libya who are asking for more help. They're not getting it. If we were enabling our allies in the Middle East, empowering them and giving them the equipment to follow the lead of the King of Jordan, ISIS would be scared, but they're not seeing that happen.
All right, now follow up on that, if you will, Pete, here, because certainly the King of Jordan growing a spine and standing up to ISIS and all the public words that he has made here, it's wonderful. But without weapons from the United States, without aid from the United States, it really won't make a substantive difference in fighting ISIS, will it?
No, it won't. I mean, we can provide the air cover instead of, the Jordanian Air Force. Let's commit the U.S. Air Force. Let's run 150, 200 sorties a day going after ISIS. Let's equip the Kurds. Let's give them, and I do work for the Kurds. They've taken 1,000 casualties. This is a region that has 5 to 6 million people. They have 1,000 killed in action. Give them the equipment that they need. They are willing to go to the front lines. They are the boots on the ground. Same thing for the Jordanians, the same thing for the Libyans. Equip them, let them fight. We can provide the logistics, the intelligence, and the air support. They will be the boots on the ground. Then ISIS will start to get concerned. But right now, they're not.
Pete, are we ever going to get to a point where the Kurds are going to lose patience with the United States? Granted, it may be their only alternative, but we've been saying this over and over again, and their people keep dying.
They have really nowhere else to go. They can't look to Baghdad. They can't look to Iran. They have nowhere else to go. They've been a staunch ally of the United States for the last 20 to 25 years. They have provided comfort and aid to the religious refugees throughout Iraq and throughout the region. They have, you're right, they've been tremendously patient with us. They will continue to be patient with us. They are proving themselves on the battlefield, and they hope that by proving themselves on the battlefield, it will enable the Obama administration to step up and give them what they need.
Are the heads of those dead Kurdish fighters on the head of Barack Obama at this point?
Well, that's the president has his strategy to confront, contain, and defeat ISIS. I don't believe that it's working. Much more could be done. This is a time now. Let's develop the solutions. We know who can help us get this done. The Kurds have a tremendous number of allies on Capitol Hill. They're all working to try to empower the Kurds, the Libyans, and the Jordanians to give them what they need. If we're not willing to lead this fight, at least there are others who not only are willing to, they are leading the fight today. That's the key. They are leading the fight, and they're very willing to be much more active if they just had the right tools.
Once again, Pete, the West always racing to defuse crises when they've actually been going on for quite some time. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, Pete. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great, thank you.
All right. Those receiving government benefits could be facing yet another hurdle to cashing a check. And this time, they may have no one to blame but those who job the system with relative ease. That's next, right here on MidPoint.